I have no idea. Between 1 minute and I don't know, half a day max. It depends how far the environment they are. But I mean, if they are WebEx or developer working on the web, I think it's 1 minute. If they're doing something rather unrelated, I mean, it would still be 1 minute, but to incorporate, it's the incorporation to the workflow that might take longer, and it is important. It's not an insignificant part.
So I know Mark has a headset and Andrea has a headset. I hope Matthias will get one soon. Can we spend a minute in there in together with you, and then we do the same with Andrea later if we can enter her environment? It's so different having you say this is that rather than a flat screen.
Sorry, can you summarize in one sentence, because the connection just cut a couple of times as you asked.
Can all of us who have a headset go into your room now and you point out a few things to us?
No, because it's not. I think this version is not networked. I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
No, but you don't. No, we can all be our own instances. That's fine, but we still have the Zoom audio, and then you can say the purple thing over there.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, we could do this.
Should we do?
Well, technically, it's not a problem to me, but I'm a little bit concerned that we might spend quite a bit of time.
Well, Andrea, can we also do it in your experience, or is that more complicated to go in?
We can, yes, but not like so quickly. I need to add you to the release channel, and then there's some additional steps, and then it will take us some time for all of us to start the application, to give you instructions. There's a code too, so we can all meet everywhere. So yes, but it's gonna be like 40 minutes realistically just to set up and get everyone in and going and pressing the right buttons. So yes, it's possible.
I can promise with my environment, you're going to be there in literally 1 minute. If your headset is charged, you just open the URL, you click on VR. So this, if you want to try to put everyone in the headset now and try, not a problem. But then, yeah, it's not going to be your data. It's going to be a bit of a forced usage. But
let's just spend a minute there today. Let's say we put a cap on 5 minutes. Because it is so, and by the way, if you go to futuretextlab.info on your browser, at the bottom of the page, there's a link to the page for today, and then you click. So you don't have to type too much. Just futuretextlab.info.
So futuretextlab.org?
.info.
In a browser, all right.
Yeah, and then go down and you'll find it. But Fabian, do we need to have the background sound?
No, we don't. We don't. You can mute it.
Yeah, I'll do that actually. That's easier than. It's all black now. I have to go back. I don't know if my.
Yes. It doesn't. When you go when it goes to sleep, let's say when you remove it, it doesn't go back. You need to refresh the page, I think, or exit and come back.
Yeah.
Andrea, I see you have request one.
Yeah.
And I'm displaying a bunch of text. So in terms of performance, I have. If it doesn't feel good, just remove the headset.
All right.
It might work really well, but I haven't tested it with the request one, so I'm not.
Sorry, what was the URL? So futuretextlab.org doesn't work for me.
No, .info.
.info. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I know you already said that a few times.
I don't know how to get out of it. It's not recognized my hands, and my controllers aren't fully charged, I think.
And where do I go here? It's like a big homepage.
You go all the way to the bottom, and there is under recent pages, there is demo/prototype 1. Click on that, and there's the link. Hoping we can put more links in for today. and I'm the only one without a headset because I have to charge my controllers. So silly.
All right, I'm in.
Why do you need the controllers?
To exit the room, to restart it again. It seems like it's not catching my hands when it's in the black mode.
So you really must show the back of the hand.
Okay.
If you really show your palm rather open wide, normally it shows on the wrist the icons. So on the palm now, you turn and you should see you don't get any icon when you show the wrist and the.
Oh, it's interesting. If I go into
And you pinch with the same hand to do the actions. So you have to, let's say, pop out of the browser, which, if I remember correctly, it's the right hand facing back, facing yourself. And then you pinch with the thumb and index, and then it should say immersive web experience. You can press quit, refresh the page, and do VR, AR as you want.
I agree with what you're saying in principle, but when I'm in AR view, it'll let me do it. It'll show the two icons, but when I pinch, they disappear.
When you pinch, it should, because I'm doing it now also. It should say quit, resume. You can say quit.
It doesn't. It's all those options not available in pass-through. When I go to pass-through, my hands don't appear. Oculus have serious onboarding problems.
Yeah, I think you need to change your hands.
Okay, let me. New hands. Yeah, no, I could do that.
And I'm trying it in AR mode. I did not try it before, and it works pretty well apparently.
Oh,
It looks great.
Guys, tell me what you see and how I can help.
For me, I can't see the controllers.
I think it's just hand tracking now.
Yeah, then I don't have it here.
You do. I mean,
Do
you
I
could
have
if
hand
you-
tracking on the Quest 1?
Yes, yes. It's somewhere in the settings. I have also a version with the controllers, but it's not this one right now. So
I'm just restarting. At least it allowed me to do that.
yeah, restarting always works. I mean, so far always did work.
Well, I'm in. Oh, and I've got a hand. Two hands.
So if you have your hands, the text, you need to pinch it not in the middle of it, as we usually tend to do, but in front of the text, let's say a little bit before the first letter of the line.
I've got a green startup bar today. I've never seen that before with an arrow pointing down. Is that because it was a restart rather than a start? Do you know?
I've never seen that.
Very odd.
So yeah, to grab the text, it's the right hand before the first character, and to execute code, so things that look like JXOR or with parentheses, it's the left hand.
No, it's fine. It's interesting looking at. I just had that flashback to that's that line from Galaxy Quest. You know, don't look up now. If only I could see what you're looking at. You know, it's the underbelly of the Omega 13.
I'm back in the world, but not your world quite yet.
Yeah,
One thing
sorry, I just activated hand tracking. I remember how much I hate it. I just really hate hand tracking. But I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna go back in. I remember why I do not have hand tracking activated.
Yeah, it's interesting because Apple's headset apparently will be hand only, not controllers, and I'm not sure that's a brilliant idea. There's a reason we write with pens and not with our fingers.
Yeah, but it also depends what you do with it. If you toss 5 centimeters diameter ball, hands are pretty good. But indeed, if you need like very fine motions, like 1 millimeter precision or less, and small, then it's not ideal. So I think if it's big, that works pretty well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you to have the choice.
And to argue on that, we just have a minute left, but I have a version of that experience where you have all four, meaning you have the hands, you have the physical keyboard, you have the virtual keyboard, you have the controllers, and you have the pen tip of the controller. So all the different affordances in terms of interaction that can work together. And that's pretty pleasant. I put hands here first because it's, let's say, the easiest, the most casual when you have just the headset and you move it around. Shall we come back to reality?
Reality used to be a friend of mine. What? No one's old enough to know that song?
Just how do you close out of it rather than leave it running?
Yeah, Frode.
You get the Oculus when you pinch your right hand, and then you press the Oculus again.
Oh yeah, so I got it. I did have it.
Yeah, it makes me think I should also add the option to do it from the environment rather than let people struggle with the operating system shortcut.
Right, it doesn't really matter, right? It'll turn itself off in due course.
I couldn't do it, so maybe it's because I have a Quest 1, but this didn't work for me. So I think for me, there's something more profound about my brain and hands just can't dealing with hand tracking, because even on the Quest 1, I just really dislike it for some reason.
Well, I think I must defend Fabienne here because the soft space environment, which is really, really much simpler than this, the hand tracking is absolutely ridiculously phenomenal. It is so, just like in a Quest room, you move your head and the room is stable, just like they've solved that. And also with the borders, he has solved that. They're simpler elements, but you do the little things, it actually works. It's just wow. So I think for some cases, yes, a controller is better, a tool is better, but depending on what it's optimized for, it can be amazing. You're in touch with Yuli from Softspace, right? Because if not, you should be, because you guys have a lot of things to discuss, and he should be here more often.
It's not something against Fabienne. It's just like for me personally, we have Quest 1, Quest 2 is in the office. I agree it can be great. It has nothing to do with Fabienne, just in general, there's still something that for me is not great. I still love the controller and the precision and not having to think about where my hand is, even the slight trembling of my hand, I'm not enjoying that. Even for me, like this is not comfortable. Even 5 minutes of this gets weird. And the fact that having the weight in my hand stabilizes my fingers. So I don't know, there's just a lot of layers to it, none of which have anything to do with Fabienne and his choices. I think most people are not like me. Most people are more than fine with the hands.
Oh, hang on, this is a really, really important issue for our community because I have a master's in not only HCI, but also ergonomics, because I had no choice. It's all I had at the time, right? So we did a lot of those measuring the weight of your hands, your head, and all of that crap. You're absolutely right. Doing this a lot is heavy. There's no question. And, when you're talking about the balance, yes, that makes complete sense that would help. So that is why it's really, really important to look at when it makes sense and when it doesn't. I could not imagine typing like this, not for anything other than a password, right? That's where a physical keyboard still in VR, AR really comes in. So I think we don't have opposing points. I don't think you and Fabienne have opposing points. It's just really, really important points to keep discussing. Anyway, I'm guessing we go over to Andrea again to go back to, oh no, sorry, Fabienne hand.
Yeah, I have my hands up, and I'm of course extremely offended. I know that I'm criticizing everything. The whole point, I'm also again going to show this. The whole point of the octopus metaphor is to say the right tool in the right context for the right person or whatever. It's like it can be as contextual and refined as you want. And when I talk about either responsive design or responsive programming, it's precisely not to say, oh, you hate hand tracking, you're stuck with it. It's like, no, absolutely not the point. The point is precisely that for your usage, your use case, your context, like if you're on the plane or if you're at home, it's not the same. You should have access to the right tool. and it might not be the same for me, for you in that context, and it must be there. So this whole metaphor or analogy of the tentacles is precisely to say this. It's like it can, maybe it sucks, maybe it doesn't suck, maybe it doesn't matter. And that's also why not in there, sadly, but in other version of this, in the other branch of the repository, there are experiences with 4 or 5 different types of input, because that's the point. And ideally also merging the different inputs, let's say vibration from the watch while you're doing hand tracking, all this kind of thing. And that's the whole reason I'm doing the experiments with let's say the metaphor of the octopus, is to say, it has to be both pervasive, responsive, and embrace, let's say, the weirdness of different both input and output and even computational devices. So there is definitely a lot of, I'm intimately convinced that there is value in whatever input you want to use, hands or not. There is beauty in it.
Before we move on, I want to ask Frode if I feel like, you mentioned this, we got carried away with our slight lack of scheduling, and we did not talk about your presentation. For me, so you presented really fast after that whole thing with the American guys. And I did miss your point about the difference between search and browse.
Oh, I'm happy to say that briefly. There isn't that much to it, but we say we browse the internet, and that means that the term has basically lost any real meaning. But I would define the difference. I'm sure you would agree. Finding is, if you know what you want, you go get it and you leave. Whether it's a shop or in a book, doesn't matter. Browsing is, you want to get a clue of what's going on. So what happened when I worked on all these basic mechanisms, because I need to finish Reader so I can, try to get some money out of these things. So I'm trying really, really simple things. And I had the problem of using color to define things, as we've talked about. And color for browsing is fantastic, potentially, if done right. But color for finding is meaningless, because if you're looking for all the pieces on spatial hypertext when you found them, why in the world would you need them to be a specific color, right? Maybe you would. Maybe just to keep you contextualized, it would. But what I'm trying to look at here is, I'm feeling intellectually a bit desperate about our ridiculous large corpus of text and the fact that it's almost unreadable. Actually, I'll please tell me if you have seen this. Where is it? Okay. I think most of you have seen this, but this is something that came to me to be quite simple. It doesn't solve the problem, but it creates another thing. So here we have this rolling document, but you can pretend it's our entire text in one massive PDF, right? So all I've done manually as a normal user, added 2 pages of themes. Have you seen this, Andrea?
I'm not sure.
Okay, it doesn't matter, because the point is really, really simple. Let's say that you are interested in anything that is aesthetic. So you select the word aesthetic, do Command F for find, and it shows you where that text appears. So it's kind of a browse find operation, because here we see Peter is saying early graphical systems had a clean design aesthetic. We can choose to click through and read that. But the point of this is there's no fancy stuff going on here at all. It's pure text, as in pure, right? So you can go in and out of it really quickly. And this is a new thing here. Okay, now hang on. If you do AR, we've now managed this week to filter it so the word ARE would not be shown. That actually took a bit of work with my programmers. So what I'm saying is that having this as a colored thing, which is what I showed you earlier, might be nice if you have a folded view, where you instead of having to read all the words. Oh, did I close it? It's real quick. And this is the last point really, but thank you for going back to it. So here, color on the left may not be that useful. But if you go into this overview, which could be shown in many different ways, here the colors could be useful because you don't need to read all the green bits to remember that green is to do with people and technology is red, for instance. So that means it goes into the browsability. So all I've been working on is a little bit of the difference between findability and browsability in documents.
I have a question. When you have those categories, so let's say you had this list of categories and aesthetics showed up in it, and you selected it, and then it showed you where that particular word. So that was a category and the actual word it searched for. Could you have below that tiers of associated terms that are subcategories that I could choose to go into? For example, if I want to be super strict about it, I just want you to show me where aesthetics appears as a word. But if I feel like I don't know exactly what I want and I want to browse in a looser term, I can choose, okay, give me aesthetics level 5. And that will give me everything with aesthetics in it, the actual word, and then everything in the 4th column on the main dictionary.com about all the synonyms of the word aesthetics and where those might appear.
Yeah, but that's not something I care about yet because it would kill me. But it's a really important question, and I will just show you what has already been done by Adam and hang on. Here we go. What I'm trying to do now, and when I can afford it, I will do it, is just provide the mechanism for reader to read all the documents that's in a special folder called the library, extract all the visual meta plus all the plain text into a database for reader. And then I want to make that code public. So at least anybody on a Mac can instantly use it, because then they can do that types of things. Because look at this. This is what Mark made possible. And Adam coded. So these documents, this is not with Visual Meta, but any Visual Meta document can slot right in. So here are all the papers from the Hypertext conference. You click on one, you get information about it. But the cool thing is, if it has cited a document, it shows it on the left. If it has been cited by someone else, it shows it on the right. So in this case, this one has been cited. You can see, well, who cited it? And you can follow it around like that. So these are the things that then become possible. Here's another one. These are all the papers in the line. And you click on it, and you can see who cited on the right. And you can see on the left who they're cited, right?
Press the tab key. Press the tab key again, because this is all Adam. The really interesting thing about this, and it really brought home to me about the metadata aspect, is that it took me, well, months of work to make the metadata. Adam said he had the broad strokes of this in about 20 minutes, and it's not much JavaScript, but it really brings it home to me, because the bit that we respond to is what you're seeing on screen. But I take two things away from it. We need more of this. And also the fact that we mustn't lose sight of how we generate the metadata underneath, because I have a feeling that the general sort of thought of most people, if you stop them in the street, is, well, oh, well, don't they have AI for that? And that's just like taking the output, connecting it to the input and just leaving it to run. I don't think necessarily the degree of sense and nuance that we would want. So, I mean, I was listening to you ask the question of Freud. I could see that absolutely it probably could be done. I mean, it has to be engineered, but it builds off this same thing. And while you guys were out, I was talking with Matthias, and we was talking about the fact that one of the problems at the boundary of search is sort of vocabulary. So, you know, when I type in, I want to look at aesthetics, I may have a very particular meaning of what that word means to me. The code at the other end of the question may not have the same default perception. And so it may be that word A actually means a completely different word, or it may be that you want just a facet of that word. And again, all that has to be built, or at least reviewed by someone competent to say it's not just gibberish. Because the big problem with just sticking everything in the AI machine is you get out what you get out. But A, you don't know if it's everything, and B, you don't know whether it's meaningful or not. But I think we're on that path. And I think you're, and the question, what's behind your question, I'm very much in accord with too.
But thank you for asking it, Andrea. And you know, one of the early things we had in this community is that a lot of VR stuff can, you know, still need to solve it in 2D. You know, VR can be an excuse for being messier. Of course, it shouldn't. But with greater affordances, well, they're in greater space. Of course, you have the bigger issue of messing up. So yeah, very happy to move on to Andrea doing a bit of a review, if you don't mind. But please, let's keep in the back of our head that being able to share stuff between environments is really ridiculously important. Not as important as telling Mark what ridiculous trousers he's wearing today.
Sorry, that's because I've got an enormous cold compress on my back at the moment, so I've done my hamstringing.
It's because you're British, but we love you for it. Anyway, Andrea, please.
Sorry, so what should I do now?
We were just talking after you had to go. That would be really good if you do a few minutes review of what you did, so it's fresh in our minds, and then we can have a more fruitful discussion, if that's okay.
All right, sure. So I tried to spatialize my experience of that one paragraph in Moby Dick. And I profoundly disagree with your statement, Frode, that we need to solve these things in 2D. My mind does not process anything in 2D. That's when I became an architect. So I do not think in 2D, even when I read text on a paper, the way my brain processes that is exactly what I just showed you. It's even worse actually in my head. That was the cleaned up version. So so for me, the 2D just is not a thing. Yes.
Okay, when I say 2D, I mean through 2D experiences. When I design author and reader and everything else, I do think of the text as a sculpture, right? Which is why I don't have lots of linear windows. For instance, when you go into a table of contents in reader or author, you fold it. You can do it on the trackpad. You fold it like this. So of course we should, you know, soon, no matter what happens, let's say in the longest, in 10 years, we will all be working in VR. I have no question about that. That'll be most of the work for every knowledge worker on the planet. No question. All I'm saying is that we shouldn't use the fact that we have 2D displays as an excuse. I mean, we watch movies and they're fully 3D in our minds. So we should think in 3D, no question, but let's not pretend that people like Mark and Matthias and me, who are not coders to your level, shouldn't be able to engage with solving it. That's all I mean. I'm sorry for taking a whole minute to say it.
Yeah, no. That's point well taken. I can get behind that distinction. But I think that distinction is very clear within this circle. It's very not clear outside the circle. And most people do attempt to solve problems in 2D.
I have to open the door. Sorry, no one's home.
No problem.
Also, drops mic, exits. Yes.
Well, I take the break to explain my recent comment in the chat that was on coloring. It reminded me of this little hint or trick from someone saying if you have two versions of your document, do a pale color for the old one so you don't mix it up. And so this just as an example for the visual that paper might decay over time if you use it. If you look at it and stare at it over time, then you have an implicit understanding that you have visited some pieces of the whole library a little bit more often than others without having some counters and numbers and some mathematics. It's just some cues to tell you where you've been and where you should go.
Yeah, the icons in Tinderbox use exactly that notion. So over time, over a few days, they alter in color. The idea being that this is something I just wrote, and this is something I wrote in the last day or so, and then after that, they're all the same. But it just gives you a sense of recency. It's really quite a nice little UI prompt. Fred.
So I want us to schedule a new session for our community, maybe with more American-friendly time going into our evening, on exactly that topic, because it's something that, in a way, the community is being torn apart on, and it's so valuable. We should have a session, I think, tell me if you agree, on what affordances from the physical world do we want to take into augmented environments. That's half. The other half is, what should we break down and completely reinvent? Because we are embodied in the world as it is. We all agree on that. Barbara wrote a book on it. It's all fantastic. We should really look at that, because this browning of paper, it's not a natural world, it's an artificial world, but we know what that is. It is obvious, it's fantastic. That's why, as I wrote in the comments, my father preferred fax paper, because it browned, he would know what's old. Other things about, all kinds of things. What do we want in there? I think the reason it's so important to have a session on it is because once we start thinking in this direction, we're feeling all we're doing is copying the affordances of nature into digital, which is similar to copy the affordances of paper into digital paper. So then we stop, and then we think, how can we expand and go crazy, just like we saw Andrea doing with her tower? So that's why I think we should have a day where we have half and half. Now we think only about that. If you get another idea, write it down and shut up. What do you think?
If we go crazy, the paper wouldn't go brown, it would go purple, right?
Only for Fabienne. Mark.
I was just thinking, yeah, no, I think that the general concept is that I think the challenge for us all is when we move things forward. Well, the highlighting is a good example. So we have digital facsimile paper on which we draw yellow boxes because someone in the 1960s found a way of making marker pens that didn't make the paper too wet and didn't destroy the ink, but allowed you to highlight a passage, whereas before we used to scribble underneath it. The question really, and actually it doesn't really, it helps with a visual tellback, but actually what we're really probably trying to do is to attach essentially metadata, even if the metadata is just this is meaningful to me. And where I see a lot of things going wrong at the moment is we rather than move what the affordance offers in principle, in concept, into the digital domain, what we actually do is we rebuild. This is why we're still typing on faux paper on a screen when we're just trying to write a document.
Yeah, right.
It will never be printed on a piece of paper.
Okay, Mark, you are agreeing with the premise, which is but just in moving along, because Andrea.
Yeah, sure.
Would that be a useful day to plan or not? I don't see any heads moving in any directions. Should we have, in a couple of weeks, maybe even just a 2-hour session where the first hour is people just saying, this we should have in VR, stop. Second, this we should break. And at each one of them, we'll do Andrea's brilliant 10-minute summaries. I think it'll be really useful for the wider community.
I think it's a great idea. I cannot promise to be able to attend, but I think it's a great idea.
Well, it doesn't have to be anytime super soon, so we'll see. Also, Andrea, we need to have a meeting. I'm so sorry that last time we talked, I was sucked into children's birthday things.
Oh, no problem at all.
Right, Andrea, over to you.
Yeah, so I did my summary. Should I do more of a summary? I don't know what else to add to that. Sorry. Also, we don't have to talk about it. I'm just glad I showed you what I had in mind.
Okay, I'll tell you one of the things that came up to give a summary of what you missed, which was something I think we need to talk about. Fabienne was saying that, of course, those blocks representing whales or fishes could be actual whales or fishes. It's not science fiction to imagine them actually beginning to swim or something. And the whole point of our discussion was that in some, exactly, yeah, let's look at the visual. But in some cases, it would be better to have a photorealistic fish, and in some cases, it's better not to. And I gave the example of being young playing Dungeons and Dragons. I love painting the miniatures, but if the miniatures really represented the character or the monster, fine. If there was any discrepancy, like I didn't have the right metal figure for this thing, it became worse. And therefore, we often use just dice to represent people. So that's why the whole photorealistic versus abstract that you showed was really worthwhile. But we would love to see your environment again, if you don't mind sharing.
I'll have to go into play mode again. I can hold on. This is all procedural stuff, so you actually can't see anything if you're not in play mode. Well, let me see.
One quick comment while you set up.
Yes.
I think the mini version, let's say you had the first person perspective, which you shared, and then you had a kind of tabletop version with a scale down. I think in terms of sharing with an audience, I think it's extremely valuable, especially I guess with an audience who is not extremely familiar with VR, because otherwise your first person perspective is still yours, and we might want to look around. We might have forgotten what was there. So I think this view is also very powerful, very interesting.
I'm gonna paste the screenshot in the chat. So for me, it's actually crucial that these are not whales. I could have easily just gotten a 3D model of a whale and populated it with whales or fish. The way I'm using this, I'm trying to, through these like little performances that I do for myself, I'm trying to establish the situation, right? So the situation here is just that the heart of that paragraph. There are these whales, and they have these particular properties, and there's this action with a harpoon, and the consequence of that is that last line that says, you feel like you exist in a delirious throb. So the point is to arrange abstract looking elements in such a way as to suggest the dynamism behind the action of this paragraph. But what I do is I build little libraries of these collections of abstract scenarios, and then I actually recontextualize them. So there might be another situation that I might want to use this in to relive the delirious throb. So it's kind of the equivalent of hand sketches when you don't want to be realistic. You know, that whole discussion about why painters towards the end of their lives start becoming like doing stupid things like children. It's like they make this super beautiful photorealistic stuff in their 20s when they're in school, and by the time they die, they just like make 5 scribbles that cost 10 million. And yeah, of course, the point is not that, you know, you just undergo some massive loss of skill as you age. You completely do not. You just need you need to drop the direct connection in order to engage in exploration and to extract the essence of that paragraph and be able to see where else you might go with it. And for that, you need to sacrifice the whale, sacrifice those things actually looking like whales.
A quick comment on this. To me, that makes complete sense. Also, due to reading the Case Against Reality. I mentioned it a few times here, but it's a book from. He's not a neuroscientist, but a cognitive researcher, I think from UCSB, Donald Hoffman. And he was basically saying reality is too complex. You never have access to reality, and thus you need an interface to it so that you can use the right level of abstraction, basically. And if the whale is a cube, because, for example, you're not an ornithologist or, I don't know, a biologist, but you, I don't know, look at the swarm or you look at the aesthetics of it or whatever, that is the right level of abstraction for you. And I think that's, for example, in software, because this is what I know, it's like there is nothing more powerful than this. You can spend your whole day, your whole week, your whole life looking at like some problem that is just too complex, because let's say you use assembly language to build something that if you use a higher level language would take literally a line or a word. So I think finding the right level of abstraction is like a superpower of sorts.
And that's a key problem with text. Absolutely. Text is not easily abstractable visually.
But text is an abstraction.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Trex abstracted something. So in a way, my little performance was about de-abstracting it. Like that paragraph is an abstraction of a three-dimensional situation that played in Melva's head. So he abstracted it, and then I'm kind of decompressing it, but through my decompression system, which is my brain and the tool that I have to decompress the text.
So there's two different hypertext systems that Mark and my wonderful advisor talked about the other day. Well, apparently there's 7, but one of them is performative or thinking, excuse me, not performative, thinking, which is what I think you're doing here. The other one is communicating. It's really,
Yes.
yeah, it's really, we have to keep bringing that up because they're not the same thing. What you made here is a complete mess. We saw you do it, so we're part of the understanding the emotion of it. That was communicated. But as a finished artifact, it communicates very little because it's not trying to communicate. It was a thinking tool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I insisted not to show you what I did. I insisted that the thing I'm making is the tool that allows you to enter that active process. So it's the user actively placing the whales and connecting the paragraph with the action. It's not the final VR environment. That's why I have zero interest in virtual architecture. I mean, we do it sometimes for work because we need to have some clients, but my top interest is not in the final thing. It's not in virtual architecture, it's not in abstract sculpture, is in tools that offer you that process. So yes, it's a thinking tool. It's not very good at communication unless is exactly what you said, unless it's a performance. So, and the performance brings you into my action by you watching me and hearing me. So yeah, I think that's the critical part.
Mark, can you please unmute?
Yeah.
And let's show a little trick right now to the other 3 of us. So you tell me what this is.
It's a whale.
Yes, it's a whale, because in the lunch break, we talked about having assignments to objects as an abstract thing for something. So Mark immediately knows this stone is a whale because we've attached our entire discussion around this object here. And Andrea, if you have your cubes there and they are whales, and we have the memory how you created these, how you told us the story of Moby Dick, then these cubes floating around in 3D in your world are also whales, because we have the common shared memory of what's there, and that's the power of abstraction.
What I find interesting in that is, and what you're also describing is you're seamlessly going from, in a sense, the constructed data-driven world of how you would actually create that object in an environment to the abstract notion that with which you can essentially compute in a completely different way. So in other words, we can talk about whales without actually having to have a whale or know how big it is or how heavy it is, because we broadly are aware of some whale-like properties and where they live and things. So that I think that's one thing I think the VR environment does offer is, and I think some people, especially those who spend less time working with sort of thinking tools and the like, may need some introduction to, but the ability to flop from the sort of the abstract thought side to the more literal side. So, you know, is this a chair in front of me or is it something else? I'm just okay, I think about chairs and I understand that that blue rectangle is a chair. And if I go into the room next door, that stone is also a chair, for as long as I wish to hold that association. Because I think where it's really powerful is I think the human mind does that really, really well, very fast, and actually has, for most people who aren't in some way inhibited, has really good retention of that. Whereas a lot of things, unwittingly, we make sort of push us into the other thing where we're drowning in the detail that's required just to make the thing in front of us. So I sort of things seem to be moving in a rather positive movement in a direction in that sense.
Yeah, I really love the story with a stone. My frustration with the text and staying on the page is that, by the way, Fred, I really love the aesthetics of the layout you showed, like the one where you have these columns with the years and you click on it and it shows the text below. So the fact that there's dynamism in the layout is really important to me, because that movement of positioning of the text is really, to me, that is the equivalent, or goes a little bit in the direction of, okay, repositioning and rearrangement, and my interaction with the text being something more action-like, because I do think that without action, everything is dead. So I think in that sense, I completely align with Fabian. Even all our talking is just like dead. Because look, I just did like a silly little 10-minute performance of like putting cubes around and pretending they're whales and talk to you about it. And then we already have a little subculture where there's already a stone that Matthias and Mark are calling a whale. and we're probably forever whenever this group meets again, even if it's going to be 15 years from now, there's going to be a stone somewhere. And then Mark is going to be like, look, what is that, Matthias? And we're all going to say, it's a whale. So the power of interacting with something through action is just never ending. It transforms you. It's how you learn about the world. It's how you learn about yourself. It's how we connect to each other, how we form subcultures, like everything. So for me, any direction in that, even if it's a dynamic layout that repositions things on the screen as I click, is a step in the right direction.
To pile up on this, to me, that was also the point of Demo Day. It's the point of prototyping. It's why also I was sharing the home directory prototypes folder, is because indeed it transforms spoken words to code. And it's not that I have an obsession with code. It's because I have an obsession with code, yes, because I'm a developer, but because that transform words to action. That's the whole point of programs, of software, is because it's not just words anymore. It's not just a description. It does things. And it does whatever. It's like controlling a robot arm. It's like turning on the light. It's like doing your counting, whatever that is. But it does something. That's the whole beauty of it. And why do I insist again on this? Is because, I don't know, I had some kind of, I don't want to say revelation because it's going to sound mystical, but I was thinking about it again a couple of days ago. And I think now that software, program, code, whatever, is a form of embodiment. It's embodiment on a device that is a computer, whatever kind of computer it is, but then it is embodied and it can exist and do something. And it's so like radically different between, oh, I have an idea about a thing, versus I look in my repository, in my directories, on this device. Even it can be like an old device I have in a box, but then I can pull it out and then run the code again and do something again, and then build on top of it. Again, playing with the abstraction, I can make it a composable object that I can use right now or in the future in 10 years or maybe never, and that's okay. But that I think it's so powerful.
So, yes, Andrea, you said if we do a session on this, you may not have time because you're very busy, and that's fine. But what is your availability coming up? Will some of the 2-hour sessions, special sessions, maybe work? And we have to move things around because Mark also has problems with Mondays now. So let's say we try to have, let's say, one monthly 2-hour session. Does that seem like an achievable thing?
I am not ready to commit today. I'm already in a complete panic mode because this whole everyone is just texting me right now, and we have 2 deadlines next week. So I'm already freaking out about this wonderful conversation, which I'm glad we had it, and I'm glad I made time for it. But I'm already a little bit screwed, so I need a bit more time until I commit again to something. Yeah, I am very interested in the 2-hour session. I just don't want anyone to wait for my availability or my psychological readiness to give another, say, a day now when I could give away a chunk of time.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Anyway, we're just going to take your work and make it look like it's winter with buildings, like in the chat. That's just Photoshop, by the way. Right. How much time do we have left for today? I haven't got the schedule in front of me.
I don't know. I may have to drop at about at the top of the hour coming up. As I think we have some visitors I didn't know about.
I would also be okay if we can do the wrap-up summary. I think we can each do a round and do that for the point of the text. Yeah, because I'm also nearing like a 10-hour day. I've been working during our lunch break, and I got up early today. So I'm slowly running out of steam on my Friday as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Should we do it by clock? Start with Fabienne, who happens to be top left on mine, or does anyone else desperately want to go first, or Fabienne later, or what's the thing? By the way, thank you for saying the word summary, because that will be the key word. We're going to find this later. Summary, summary, summary.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for everyone to just give it a go, to just try. I personally had a lot of fun. That was very interesting. I had nowhere, I mean, I wanted to do so much more, but I'm used to it, so I'm not frustrated. I got a lot of ideas from what everyone said and shared. So again, very grateful for it. It's interesting that we always spend a bit of time like this, the summary, but also like what traces do we want and how do we want to do it. I would recommend, if we were to do another session like this, that we dedicate time for it, both to not skip it, because it does matter, and including on communication, as we mentioned also, because it does provide future affordances. Like, for example, will we do another session like this will also depend on how we remember this very session, how useful it is, how useful the traces we produced will be. So I think it is valuable also to be able to bound it so that we don't drift too much to this, because then it becomes too meta. And again, valuable, but not to the point of overtaking a session that is dedicated to showing and doing and getting feedback on it. So I would just, let's say, suggest this for next time. And yeah, that will be it for me. Don't want to do it.
Oh, I'm actually next according to these windows. Right, so yes, now you are going a bit meta, but just to do the summary bit, I feel that these sessions where we work on and off, it's a very good format, and I think we can keep playing with it. Maybe we have longer break in the day for actually getting other work done, so we don't expect everything to be this. But to have what we've been trying to have in the community is, if we have a special symposium or something, people to do something before, during, and after, and it never happens. 1 or 2 people will do something before. So if we do it on the same day, there is actually stuff done. So it becomes a very interesting dynamic for sure. And I'm very grateful for the summary concept, because one of the things it does, it acts like a themes page. So for instance, what I'm saying now, I will include the word whale because that was discussed, especially with Matthias and Mark. So when someone reads this document, they can select the word whale, and then they can see later on in the document where it's being discussed. Other things that I think are worth summarizing in that way is paper that gets yellow, fax paper. There was a story about why flowers can be yellow and purple. Turns out there are deep reasons behind it, not just superficial, so to speak. The behavior of a stag was discussed, and the reason for that was different context allow you to see different things. Then we went into Andrea's world, where she showed us crazy things floating up in space above the ground, which we discussed later was not for hypertextual presentation, it was for her thinking, and we were allowed to watch the performance, which is really important. I then took the images into Photoshop and messed with them just to see that in the future, real work like that can be instantly turned into nonsense. You know, it can be pulled in so many directions. Fabien's demo was very much about his kind of aesthetic environment where he wants to work. And I think that's really, really important. I'm sitting here in a physical room that I've decided for my aesthetic environment for work. It's almost like a headset. I put on the headset and I enter Fabien's room, and I'm not happy with everything, which is great. I would like to co-invent that room, maybe as a theme, but the idea of providing workrooms that do specific and new affordances are good. And then in closing my summary, what I would like to see is we have a session in the future where we talk about what natural affordances to bring into XR, VR, AR, and which ones we should absolutely change. And I'm very grateful for today. It has definitely helped me deal with the 3-letter acronym situation on a previous day. Andrea.
I also feel grateful for today. It was refreshing, like I thought it would be, to have things that we do. I think in the future, maybe I don't know, maybe we are a bit more structured. It's a bit hard because then we kind of fall into the usual conference pattern where, okay, time is up after 50 minutes. And that also feels not very satisfying when you're really getting into some topic. So yeah, we'll just have to maybe play that by ear. But I think that a lot of things, I think that all the right things came out today, and they came out of the demos. I think when we talk, we all have a lot of passion and a lot of things going on in our heads. So the conversation goes in a lot of different directions. It can take hours and hours. And then we have these issues with what we do with this transcript that Fred keeps talking about, which are real important issues. However, if you just look at what work that was shared, right? If you look at my performance, Fabien's work, Adam's work, Frode's work with the colors and the categories and the search versus browse, the work has all the relevant topics of this group as far as I'm concerned. It talks about the difference between abstraction and realness, right? Like my research question this morning was, what about 3D immersive space could be relevant in the way we process the abstraction of text? And Frod, what you propose for the next session is what from the real world, what kind of affordances can we take from the embodied person into VR and AR, and what makes sense and what doesn't. So I think the common theme for me is like this tension between text being abstract and computing being abstract and programming languages being abstract, words and letters being something abstract. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have these, like, you know, the now moment, the action, the thought being processed right now, the moment of understanding, which needs to have a certain texture and feel satisfying and beautiful, and it's what we're all craving for. That all happens now in physical reality, not in the space of abstractness. That space is always dead. Words and letters are always dead. And I think every single project that was shown today is proposing a very clear way to write that contradiction, to write that tension, right? Like Adam took the paragraph and made it a spiral in space with 3 red dots, right? So there was like movement in that. I did like a little performance. Fabian took all these devices that are actual physical objects in the room, each with their own processing power, and brought, so there's this realness of the devices he even showed us on the screen, and then brought that into this virtual space. Freud keeps talking about color and has this beautiful dynamic layout. So I'm really happy about all that. I think until this point, we might have been undermining the scope by not bringing more actual work in and just sticking with these long conversations and endless transcripts. So I think the work speaks with way more clarity than we do.
Still nothing wrong with a bit of text describing it. Right, Matthias. Matthias.
No lip reading since, yeah. So what one thought just crossed my mind, so I start with that. I have, Fabian, you very much remind me on Neo in the Matrix, Keanu Reeves right now. So that was really just from the image right now. And the other thing, well, try to sum it up for today. I haven't really planned to be here, but I'm really glad that I was. I was a little bit confused about the schedule, European summertime or whatever. Nonetheless, I had some wonderful encounters and new ideas, and of course this whale thing. Again, Fabian, I like showing you all the different devices, and Frode, your theme to think about how we connect all the systems. So Fabian, what's happening on your desk as immediately to play with the devices that are all around us, but also how do we connect eventually all the systems that we are working on? So how do we get from one VR space into the other? How do we get from the flat screen space and the good old hypertext, if it still exists, and all the paper world and all the dead paper? Andrea, yes, dead, but the best we have from people, if the people are also dead, so this is still valuable and live if you dive into what's written there on the dead paper, on the dead trees with the dead letters. So it's the best we have in terms of thinking of our heritage. So how do we connect all these systems with each other seamlessly? So there won't be the one system fits all. There will be different devices to interact systems. One is more for browsing, for finding, for reading, for writing new ideas on an empty sheet of paper, but these systems should be interoperable in the sense that we can select certain chunks and move them over into a starting point of the other system, which is just another system, but the same thinking space. So this would be very, very, very interesting if we, at some point, are able to connect our prototypes to each other, technically connect them, and then really work on the metasphere that all the idea spaces inside these connect. Anything else? I think that's it for now. And thank you, Mark, for asking what I'm doing, because what I've done seems to also fit into these systems. So if we have old texts on old paper and spread them out in a virtual space, then it's quite similar to what Frode just said. So these are the incoming references. This is the current paper that I'm reading, and these are the papers that are referenced from there. And this is spatial already because we are spatial beings. I remember there's the book, there's the paper. I was there in that cinema when I watched that movie and so on. And we should try to reuse this physicality of our human beings if we move much more into the virtual space than we already are. Sounds good. I don't know whether this was a summary, but I'd like to share these thoughts to the end today. Thank you. It was a good company today.
Thank you, Matthias. Before Mark, did you have a small comment there, Fabian, or was your hand up by mistake? Or
no, it was a thumb up, not by mistake.
okay, sorry.
In general, I'll still comment anyway if I get the floor. To indeed highlight the point of, and we mentioned it also a couple of times before, is ideally connecting the different prototypes together. That open up so much more possibilities. So yeah, just wanted that part in particular of how we can not just learn from each other, but if tools and programs are indeed alive, who can help us to build context that is alive or not, yeah, we can do so much more. It's trickier, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, perfect. Mark.
I find today really interesting, partly because it sort of made manifest something that I normally do in here, but it's a stepping from the abstract, which in informational terms I think of as like linked data, to sort of the more literal, the actual data, and it's, but also some of the problems that comes with it. You know, if we get lost in deciding what sort of whale, what sort of object we use to typify the whale, whilst forgetting that, as the very end of the conversation showed, whether it's a blue sphere or a stone or a bit of paper or something, doesn't really matter. Our minds are very plastic in that result. And I think we tend to forget that when we build systems. We can cope with massive ambiguity in that thing. Basically, as long as the labels match up, we can do an awful lot. So I find that very interesting. I was, interested to see your progress with Author. I think the changes to the headings is, as ever, after the fact, blindingly obvious, but lovely, works really well. And something I've taken away to noodle on is this issue of searching versus browsing. I do think we tend to treat them as the same, and they're not. And that's to our own confusion, because we think we're doing one and we're doing the other, and essentially we're using something that wasn't designed for what we're doing. And I've also had reason to revisit thoughts about that relate to search and browsing, which is mapping vocabulary. And it's not a case of blaming the other person. The point is, what we think may not be the same for everyone, or indeed the sort of software actor we're dealing with, and finding ways to negotiate that effectively is something also for us to take on board. When we say whale, do we mean a stone or do we mean a blue rectangle? Sometimes we may need to explain that, and we don't realize in the moment. And even if we wanted to, we aren't given the affordances to do so. So that's something else I take away from today, but I found it very interesting. So thanks to everyone here, and thanks especially to those who actually presented something.
Sorry, I'm a bit distracted here. Matthias sent a cool picture of us. I just had to save it with the Foley headsets. Yeah, I mean, thank you all. And I remember when teaching, there was a group of very dedicated students, and it was teaching advertising/communication. And I asked them once, in a small group, what is the most important thing you feel in order to have a good dialogue? And I was surprised, and it makes sense. Safety. They needed to feel safe, that they wouldn't be derided or something. And I think there's another layer to that, which is comfort. So for instance, with Andrea here today, we're very grateful that you are here. But we absolutely do not want to get into a situation where there is too much of a time pressure or anything else like that. So I'm really grateful that you are intelligently putting on the brakes, because it's very easy in a meeting to agree to all kinds of nonsense. So that's good. And we'll keep this going. We'll try to transcript this in whatever way we can. And we will keep doing what we can.
I love the photo. It reminds me, up until very recently, you just said, no, keep on talking. I'm just going to rest my eyes.
Yeah, sorry, that sparks a lot. Okay. Any other comments before we adjourn? Other than happy Eurovision Song Competition Day tomorrow. I'll be watching it. It's my wife's birthday, and she doesn't want to have a party, so that'll be all we do. By the way, have you heard any of the songs? One of the songs from Austria is actually "Who the Hell is Edgar?" Showing him that and explaining that there's a bad word in there was a challenge for a 6-year-old. But yes, "Who the Hell is Edgar?" Not a bad song. It's about Edgar Allan Poe. Look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye.
Take care.